63% of Americans say the economy feels bad. Grocery bills feel like they've doubled, and paychecks just aren't stretching anymore. And yet at the same time, we're being told the economy is booming. So which one is true? And are we actually heading into a historic economic boom? Or are families quietly drowning under higher prices? Just weeks before Christmas, bold promises were made, big numbers were thrown around, and confidence was sky high. But step outside the speeches and into real life, and the story feels very different tonight. We're cutting through the noise, the politics, and the polished words to look at what's really happening to your money, your bills, and your future. Stay with me, because the truth isn't as simple as it sounds. This speech wasn't just another political appearance. It came at a very strategic moment, just days before Christmas, when families are already feeling pressure from higher spending. The president chose prime time to talk directly about the economy, that timing matters. End-of-year speeches are not really about numbers alone. They're about shaping how people feel as they enter a new year. When leaders talk about the economy at moments like this, they're trying to set a narrative, hopeful, confident, and forward-looking, especially when public frustration is high. What also makes this speech important is the growing gap between official economic messaging and everyday experience. On paper, governments often highlight growth, trade wins, or long-term plans. But for millions of Americans, the real economy is measured at the grocery store, the gas station, and the rent check. When a president strongly defends his economic record, it's usually because he knows many people aren't fully convinced. This wasn't just a celebration, it was a defense. There's also a political layer here that can't be ignored. Economic confidence plays a huge role in elections, approval, ratings, and public trust. So when people believe the economy is strong, they're more likely to support the leadership in power. So that's why this speech focused so heavily on past blame, present achievements, and future promises. It was designed to reassure supporters, win over skeptics, and reset the conversation. So this speech matters not because of how powerful it sounded, but because of what it was trying to do, change perception. And when perception and reality don't line up, that's when it becomes important to pause, step back, and ask tougher questions, questions we're going to explore as this video continues. At the heart of this speech were a series of bold, confident claims meant to paint a picture of strength and success. The first and biggest claim was that the country is on the edge of an economic boom unlike anything seen before. That kind of statement instantly grabs attention. It signals optimism, control, and momentum, especially during a time when many people are unsure about their financial future. The message was clear. Things are not just good, they're about to get great. Another major theme was blame. The president pointed fingers at the previous administration, describing the economy he inherited as a mess. This is a familiar political strategy. By shifting responsibility backward, current struggles are framed as cleanup work rather than failure. Any improvement, no matter how small, can then be presented as proof of effective leadership and smart decision-making. The speech also leaned heavily into border security, connecting immigration control directly to economic stability. Strong borders were described as a major achievement, with the idea that tighter enforcement strengthens jobs, wages, and national security. Whether viewers agree or not, the economic message was simple: control the border, protect the economy. Tariffs were another big talking point. They were presented as a financial win, bringing in revenue and standing up to foreign competition. The speech framed tariffs as proof of tough negotiation and economic independence, rather than a trade-off with consequences. Finally, there was the promise that inflation is coming down fast. This claim aimed to directly address public frustration over rising prices. It suggested relief is already on the way and that leadership actions are working. Together, these claims formed a confident, almost unstoppable narrative. But bold claims invite bold questions, and that's where the real conversation begins. And this is the moment where we pause the speeches and look at the numbers, because data doesn't care about confidence or tone. When we step away from big promises and check independent reports, a more complicated picture starts to appear. Inflation may not be rising as fast as before, but prices are still high, and that difference matters. For families, it doesn't feel like relief when groceries, rent, and utilities stay expensive, even if inflation slows. Slower inflation doesn't mean prices go back down. It often just means they're rising less quickly. Polling data tells a similar story. A clear majority of Americans say the economy feels bad to them personally, and even more say their income is not keeping up with the cost of living. That gap between wages and expenses is where frustration grows. You can have job numbers that look stable, yet still have households struggling month to month. That's because having a job doesn't automatically mean having financial breathing room. Unemployment numbers also deserve context. Even small increases matter, especially when they break multi-year trends. A slight rise may not sound alarming in a speech, but it can signal cooling momentum underneath the surface. For workers, it means more competition, less leverage, and more uncertainty. Feelings that never show up in optimistic headlines. What the data really shows is not a collapse, but not a boom either. It shows an economy moving unevenly, where some sectors do well while everyday consumers feel pressure. That disconnect explains why official statements sound positive while public confidence remains low. Numbers can be technically correct and still miss the lived experience of millions. And that's why fact-checking isn't about proving someone right or wrong. It's about understanding the full picture behind the claims. To really understand the economy, you have to listen to the people living in it every single day. For many Americans, the economy isn't a chart or a percentage. It's the moment they swipe their card at the grocery store and hold their breath. And people talk about buying fewer items but paying more, and cutting back on small comforts and still feeling like they're falling behind. These aren't isolated stories. They're becoming common experiences across different income levels. What stands out is not just frustration, but confusion. Many people hear that the economy is strong, yet their personal reality tells a different story. Rent keeps rising, insurance costs jump without warning, and savings accounts don't feel as secure as they used to. Even those with steady jobs say they feel stuck, working just as hard, if not harder, but with less to show for it at the end of the month. That emotional pressure adds stress that numbers alone can explain. There's also a growing sense of imbalance. People notice that while corporations report profits and markets stay active, everyday costs don't tease. This creates a feeling that the system works for some, but not for everyone. When leaders talk about economic wins, many Americans quietly ask, for who? That question matters because confidence in the economy is deeply personal. Perhaps the most telling sign is how people talk about the future. Instead of excitement, there's caution. Families delay big purchases, young adults postpone major life decisions, and many focus on survival rather than growth. This cautious mindset shows that economic optimism isn't just about data, it's about trust. And right now, trust is fragile. Listening to these voices helps explain why glowing speeches struggle to land when real life tells a harder story. These three topics, tariffs, borders, and inflation, sound powerful in political speeches, but their real-world impact is far more complex. Let's start with tariffs. On paper, tariffs are meant to protect local industries and bring money into the country. But in practice, they often raise costs for businesses that rely on imported materials. Those higher costs don't just disappear. They usually get passed down to consumers. That means higher prices at the store, even if the policy is framed as a win. Border policy is another area where the messaging is simpler than the reality. Strong border enforcement is often linked to job protection and wage growth, but the economy doesn't move in straight lines. Many industries, especially agriculture, construction, and services, depend heavily on immigrant labor. When that labor supply tightens, businesses can face shortages, delays, and higher operating costs. Again, those costs often show up as higher prices for everyday goods and services. Inflation ties all of this together. Inflation isn't caused by one single policy. It's influenced by supply chains, energy costs, labor markets, and global events. When leaders say inflation is coming down because of specific actions, it's important to ask how long that takes to reach households. Even when inflation slows, prices usually stay high. For families already stretched thin, that feels like no relief at all. The key issue is that these policies often involve trade-offs. They may help certain sectors while putting pressure on others. Speeches tend to highlight the benefits and skip the downsides. Understanding whether these policies truly help depends on where you stand in the economy. That's why it's important to look beyond slogans and ask how these decisions affect real people, not just headlines or political talking points. After defending past decisions and highlighting current achievements, the speech shifted toward the future because promises are powerful, Future plans are meant to restore hope, redirect attention, and reassure people that relief is coming. One of the key ideas introduced was targeted financial support, including proposals like a special payout for certain groups framed as a reward for service and sacrifice. Symbolically, these promises sound strong and patriotic, and emotionally, they resonate with people who feel overlooked. But future promises deserve careful attention, especially during uncertain economic times. One-time payments can provide short-term relief, but they rarely fix long-term problems. A single check may help cover bills for a month, but it doesn't lower rent, reduce grocery prices, or create lasting wage growth. And that's the tension many Americans feel: temporary support versus permanent stability. There's also the question of who benefits and who doesn't. So when financial promises are targeted, large portions of the population may feel left out, and that can deepen the sense of division, especially when inflation affects nearly everyone. For families struggling with daily expenses, promises that don't apply to them can feel more like political messaging than meaningful solutions. Another important factor is timing. Promises about the future often depend on conditions going perfectly. Strong growth, stable markets, and political cooperation. If those conditions change, plans can be delayed, scaled back, or quietly dropped. That uncertainty makes people cautious about trusting what comes next. Future-focused speeches are designed to inspire confidence, but confidence alone doesn't pay bills. The real test of any promise is whether it addresses the root causes of economic stress. And that's why these proposals need to be examined not just for how hopeful they sound, but for how realistic and sustainable they truly are. When you step back and look at everything together, the speeches, the data, and the public reaction, a clearer pattern begins to emerge. The economy isn't just about numbers going up or down. It's about how those numbers are used to tell a story. Political leaders often focus on selective wins to create confidence, while uncomfortable details are pushed into the background. This doesn't necessarily mean the information is false, but it does mean it's incomplete. The bigger picture is that the economy can show signs of strength while still failing many people at the same time. Stock markets, trade deals, and corporate earnings can perform well, even as households struggle with rising costs and financial anxiety. Both realities can exist together. The problem starts when one side of the story is used to dismiss the other. When people feel their lived experience is being ignored, trust begins to break down. Another key issue is perception. Confidence in the economy heavily influences spending, investing, and overall stability. That's why shaping perception becomes just as important as managing policy, but perception has limits. You can talk people into feeling secure if their bank accounts tell a different story. Eventually, personal experience outweighs messaging. This bigger picture also highlights why economic debates have become so emotional. Money affects dignity, security, and future planning. When leaders speak confidently while people feel uncertain, it creates frustration and division. So people aren't just arguing about policies, they're arguing about whose reality counts. Understanding the bigger picture means accepting complexity. There are no simple villains or miracle solutions. Economic outcomes are shaped by global forces, past decisions, and present trade-offs. Recognizing this helps cut through extremes, both blind optimism and total pessimism. And once you see the full picture, you're better equipped to judge claims, question promises, and make sense of what's really happening beyond the headlines. So, what should you take away from all of this? The most important thing is to watch economic speeches with a critical but balanced mindset. Big claims, confident language, and strong promises are designed to influence how you feel. Not just what you know. That doesn't automatically make them wrong, but it does mean they should never be accepted at face value. Always ask what's being highlighted, and just as importantly, what's being left out. It also helps to separate national averages from personal reality. An economy can improve on paper while still feeling difficult in daily life. Your experience, your bills, your savings, your stress is valid data too if your income isn't keeping up with costs. That matters just as much as any official report. Don't let statistics convince you to doubt what you're living through. At the same time, avoid falling into all or nothing thinking. The economy is rarely entirely good or entirely bad. Different groups are affected in different ways, and policies often help some while hurting others. Understanding this complexity protects you from emotional reactions driven by headlines or political loyalty. Most importantly, stay informed from multiple sources, look at data, listen to experts, and pay attention to real stories from people around you. The more perspectives you consider, the clearer the picture becomes. This isn't about choosing sides, it's about understanding impact. When you approach economic conversations this way, you move from reacting to reasoning, and that's the goal. Not to be impressed by speeches or overwhelmed by bad news, but to think clearly, ask better questions, and make sense of what these policies actually mean for your life and your future. Now, I want to turn this conversation over to you, because no chart or speech matters more than real experiences. How does the economy feel to you right now when you go grocery shopping, pay your rent, or check your bank balance at the end of the month? Does it feel like things are improving, staying the same, or getting harder? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments below. I read them, and more importantly, other viewers do too. This is where real discussion happens. If you agree with some of these policies, say why. If you disagree, explain what you're seeing in your own life. Respectful disagreement is welcome here, because understanding grows when different perspectives are shared. Your story might help someone else realize they're not alone in what they're feeling. If this breakdown helped you see the bigger picture or think a little differently, hit the like button. It tells the algorithm this content matters and helps more people find it. And if you're new here, consider subscribing. This channel is all about cutting through noise, simplifying complex topics, and talking honestly about issues that affect our everyday lives. Also, let me know what you want to see next. Do you want a deeper dive into inflation, how tariffs actually affect prices, or how job numbers can be misleading? Comment your suggestion below. We're just getting started. Stay curious, stay informed, and don't let headlines think for you. I'll see you in the next video.